Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. 10 years ago, I was a master's student at University Putra Malaysia in Selangor, Malaysia. I decided to write my master's thesis on Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, the former Prime Minister of Malaysia and arguably one of the most important names out of Southeast Asia and the Muslim world. Now, at the time, Dr. Mahathir was a former prime minister, but he was influential enough, and I found his views to be original enough and profound enough that I will dedicate months of my research life to understanding his legacy, his personality, and his views. And I have to say it was a profound 2 years of research. In February 2013, I had the pleasure and honor of meeting the man himself, Dr. Mahathir, at his private office in Putrajaya, Malaysia. Now, of course, he was generous enough to give me his time, about an hour, to a very young master's student who was very new to Malaysia and to the academia. We talked about a wide range of issues. I came back to Iraq after conducting my master's degree. I came back to Iraq and he came back into active politics. He ran a very successful political campaign against his former party, UMNO, and he became prime minister again. At 92, he became prime minister again. Now, for so many people, this was a surprise. For me, it was not. I had studied the man, I had met the man. I knew this man is profoundly different from so many people you will come across in your life. He was a man who was ready to work for what he believed in his 90s. Like a young man, he was ready to sacrifice his time and his energy for what he believed in his 90s. Now, this profound man needs to be studied more and more and more, to be understood more and more and more. And after 10 years, I thought it's only appropriate to conduct another session of interviews with Dr. Mahathir. So last month, I had the opportunity and the pleasure of talking to Dr. Mahathir again. I was in Konya, the city of Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi, when I conducted this interview with Dr. Mahathir. I was literally hundreds of meters away from the tomb of Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi. So this interview is conducted under that spiritual beauty. I decided to conduct 2 sessions with Dr. Mahathir. The first session, which will be this video that you will see, is dedicated to understanding Dr. Mahathir's personality. In this video, he will talk about so many issues, so many topics related to his character, related to his life, to his upbringing, to his relationship with his parents, to his relationship with his kids and grandkids, to his diet, and to many, many more, right? Very, very important topics that he will talk about in the 50 minutes interviews that I conducted with him. In the second interview, I will talk about his views, his political views, his social views. And I decided to publish the first interview today, July the 10th, because it coincides with the birthday of the man himself, Dr. Mahathir. Today he turns 98. 98, mashallah. That's a very long journey in life, according to our modern standards. And the man I met is still in the same vigor, in the same power, and in the same energy. The old age has not calmed the man down. He's still as visionary and as strong as before. And he talks about his views with the same dedication. So I think we have a lot to learn from this man who just became 98 today. I am presenting this video as a very small birthday gift to Dr. Mahathir, and I would say in his Bahasa Melayu, which I think he loves the most. Selamat Hari Lahir, Dr. Mahathir. Allah selamatkan kamu. And I hope you will enjoy this interview with Dr. Mahathir. Assalamu alaikum. Right. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Mahathir.
Walaikum salam.
It's a great honor and pleasure to be meeting you again after 10 years In 2013, I was a master's student in University Putra, Malaysia, and I had the pleasure and honor of meeting you at the same exact office where you are sitting right now. Of course, you were very generous enough to give me your time at the time. To a master's student who was very young and not very knowledgeable about Malaysia at the time, I dedicated my 2 years of doing the masters to study your views about Islam and democracy. And I've talked about our interaction and the master's studies findings in different platforms. Before 2 years, I did a video in Kurdish about your views and your worldview about democracy, Islam, leadership, and it became very popular. Around more than actually 90,000 views on YouTube, and it's quite a big number given that my language, Sorani Kurdish, is not a very popular big language in the world. So what I realized is that despite all the years that I've passed in your life as a leader and as a person, there is still a lot of interest in Dr. Mahathir in the Muslim youth, be they Kurdish, Turkish, Arab, or the others. And I thought it would be only appropriate to maybe conduct another session of interviews to study two aspects of Dr. Mahathir, the personal and the political. And to be honest, the personal is more important to me than the political, because we have seen Dr. Mahathir, the leader and the prime minister and the politician, a lot. I don't think we have known a lot about Dr. Mahathir, the person. So what I'm going to do is to conduct two different sessions with you. This session will be more about the personal aspect of Dr. Mahathir, and I hope that I will be able to take some information out of you, which is not an easy task to do. I know that. So if you are ready, let's start the interview.
Yes, yeah, I'm quite ready.
Thank you so much. So let's start from the obvious question, actually. In about a month, if I'm not mistaken, you'll turn 98. And given the human lifespan of the modern day, that's quite a long time, mashallah. I would like to hear from your own words. How do you describe your life, Dr. Mahathir?
Yeah, I'm very careful about myself, sometimes knowingly, sometimes without knowing it. For example, it was fashionable when I was a boy, it was fashionable for people to smoke cigarette. I tried to smoke cigarette. I found it was very unpleasant, and I don't see why I should spend money on cigarette. So I did not learn to smoke. And that later on, it was found that smoking causes cancer of the throat and the like. So without knowing it, I had adopted a very good practice. Don't smoke, don't drink. And of course, in terms of eating food, as a boy, I eat a lot because you are growing. But after I mature, I become older, I don't take so much food because I don't want to increase my weight and things like that. Many of these things are quite normal things, not very special about me. But the most important thing is that if you don't suffer from fatal diseases like cancer, like heart attacks, but you can survive for a long time. You should, provided, of course, you are moderate in your lifestyle.
Well, Dr. Mahathir, you jumped ahead and answered quite a few important questions I had for you. So you talk about diet. Could you describe briefly about your diet? What do you eat, or what did you used to eat?
Well, the staple food in Malaysia is rice, and rice is carbohydrate. and it tends to fatten you. At a young age, of course, you need a lot of food because you are growing. But later on, like at my age, 90 plus, I don't need much food. I don't need rice. I eat bread at times, but I was careful not to allow my body to fatten, to take in enough more food than I need, because it will cause the body weight to increase, and that puts a strain on my heart. So the main thing is not selection of food so much, but eating not too much food. That is the advice of my mother.
Well, that's a great advice. That's a great advice for me. I think for many people around this part of the world, in Middle East, where we kind of enjoy food a lot, or maybe too much.
Yeah.
So, ask you. You said that when it was fashionable to smoke cigarettes as a young person, you didn't do it. How, what was the motive for that? Was it your personal decision or a family upbringing? How did you manage to resist the temptation of the generation at the time?
My father was very strict about not smoking cigarette as a young man.
Mm.
Of course, when you are older, that restriction was removed. But when you are a boy, smoking is forbidden. Was forbidden for me, so I didn't smoke. And at that time, there was a war, and getting cigarettes was very difficult. But I told myself, when the British return with their good cigarette, I will learn how to smoke. And when they returned, I did try to smoke, but it was very unpleasant. It doesn't help in any way. The taste in the mouth was bad. So I told myself, why should I spend money on this bad taste? So I didn't go on smoking. Although, well, people in those days thought it was fashionable to smoke. I don't care about being fashionable.
You don't care about being fashionable,
No.
right? So, how was your relationship with your parents? Given that you said your father was very strict, how was the relationship with both parents?
Yeah, I was much more influenced by my mother. But of course, in those days, the father was quite distant. They don't converse with their children. The children looks upon him as a disciplinarian.
Hmm.
His main objective is to see that I would be well educated. So much so that when we hear him coming back, the the sound of his cough is enough for us to run to our books and read and study. So that is my father, and he was a disciplinarian because he was a school teacher before. And my mother, on the other hand, was very protective of me, but also told me what is right, what is wrong. My mother shaped me because I learned that what is haram, what is halal, what is good, what is bad, what is forbidden, what is not. All these things I learned from my mother. But she was very soft in her ways, not very strict, but she looked well after me. So whatever good character I may have is due to my mother.
Wow, mashallah. Well, given your relationship with your parents, how do you describe your relationship with your kids and grandkids that you have now?
Well, I was, uh, I don't want to be like my father was to me. I want to be more friendly towards my children. So we are a very close family. Our children show respect, but on the other hand, they don't fear me. They they are able to converse with me, to talk with me, discuss problems with me. So they are very close. Not like my father and me. My father was a very strict figure, sometimes quite frightening. And the idea that you must study hard uh, is because he was insistent on that. But I don't have to insist on my children to study. On their own, they study.
Well, the problem nowadays is that studying is not the only issue that's facing the new generation. Uh, I'm sure you are very well aware of some of the challenges that's facing them. It's facing the new generation, including your own grandkids. Do you see any huge difference between the young people at your time and young people right now? What will be those differences?
Well, we are exposed to much less environment than present young people. My world at that time was just my house. It expanded to my town. It later on expanded to the whole state. But the rest of the world was very far from me. They don't influence me. But today's youth have access to every part of the world, and they learn about other cultures, other values, and all that. And some of these things influence them. So the present day children, young people, are much more influenced with standards and practices in other countries. During my time, the only model I have is the people in my own town, that's all, my own surrounding. And that is very limited. So there is a big difference between myself when I was young and the young people of today. Young people of today are very liberal, are very much influenced by Western values, etc.
So what's the best tool to make sure that the kids and grandkids do not get confused by the noise that's coming from everywhere?
Well, that is a very tough thing because whether we like it or not, they are exposed to the rest of the world, particularly the Western world, through TV, through travel, and all that. And cannot be like what I was when I was a boy. But to a certain extent, we explain to them and we set the example to them that certain practices in the West are not suitable for us. You know, nowadays, there is too much talk about equality, about being liberal. That is Western creed now. We have to be equal, we have to be liberal. But we in Malaysia, we still want to show respect to parents, respect for the institution of marriage and family, respect for older people, and that sort of thing. So we retain what I used to call as Eastern values, Asian values. We don't want to be completely Eurocentric. The world have been Eurocentric for 200, 300 years because they were the model. But that model has now deteriorated. The values of 100 years ago or even 50 years ago of the West is not what they have value now. For example, their dress code it has changed. Formerly, they were well dressed with necktie and all that, but today they wear torn clothing. They spend much money buying clothing that is torn at a higher price.
Uh, well, that's the challenge, as you said, going away from a Eurocentric world into a new world order. I will talk about these issues, inshallah, in the next session, where I will discuss your political views, the legacy, the world views. Uh, but keeping it personal in this one, you yourself have studied as a young man out abroad, away from Malaysia. How was the experience, and how did you manage to keep it as you said, to remember that you belong to a certain culture and not to a different culture.
Yeah. Well, from the time when I was small, the 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 people of Malaysia were of mixed races, three different races: Malays, indigenous people, the Chinese, and the Indian.
I think I lost Dr. Mahathir. Sorry, I lost you for a bit, but you are back now. Please continue.
Well, we are familiar with a multiracial environment. So when I become a leader in the country, I know how to deal with different races, what they like, what they don't like, how far I can go in helping the indigenous people, and what I shouldn't do. All those things uh, I was able to do because I grew up in that environment, and that teaches me. It's not the same as many other countries where a single ethnic group, people the country. For example, many Arab countries are Arabs only. They speak the same language, same culture. But in Malaysia, we know that we are different. We have to deal with different people. We have to learn how to be tolerant of other people's practices.
Right. To be tolerant of their practices, but also not to entirely surrender to a foreign practice, to a different cultural practice. Going back to the family, you said that you have a close family, and I'm sure that your long-lasting marriage had an influence in that. The fact that you have been married for so long and still together. How would you describe a happy and successful marriage or a lasting marriage? What's the secret of that?
Well, my father is quite strict about marriages. He himself had two wives, but that was because the first one died and he married my mother. So in my family, polygamy is not practiced. And my father insists that you should not have more than one wife. So the whole family is like that. Practically none of us have practiced polygamy. So when I grew up, I also adopted that value. So I find that the family is very close. And for example, when you feel you are attracted to marry again, I used to think if I do that, what would be the reaction of my children? They will feel hurt. So I thought that, well, I shouldn't. I should, although I could marry like all other Muslims, four wives, but I thought that I wouldn't hurt the feelings of my wife, the feelings of my children.
So at one point it crossed your mind to marry again,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but you
That,
didn't because you listened to your father.
yeah, I listened to my father. I mean, he was very strict. I mean, our behavior was very follows the practices, the moral values instilled in me by my parents.
Right. Well, talking about the values that you have taken from your family, one thing that's I have observed about Malay people during my stay in Malaysia, and I think many people in the world can also recognize, is that Malay people are very modest, very down to earth people. They're not arrogant, at least from our point of view, from what we saw. And one of the most striking points in your memoir, the A Doctor in the House, was when you first started as a leader on the world stage, you found out that some of the world leaders, especially the Western leaders, do not understand your modesty. They take it for another thing. Maybe they read it falsely. Uh, how do you describe that? How did you manage to balance between being a modest Malay, a modest Muslim, which you have to be modest, and a world leader or a Malay leader who has to represent his people in a proud way?
Well, Malays generally feel that they are not as good as other people. They treat all foreigners as their master. They give titles to all foreigners. For example, all the British, all the white people were called Tuan. Tuan means master. They regard these foreigners as master. If it is a Chinese, it is Tauke. Tauke means a very successful businessman. So there is a sort of feeling of inferiority which caused them to be because them to behave as if they cannot compete with others. They are not as good as others. But I had to overcome that. I had to overcome that because I read history a lot. I read the history of the Europeans, and I find that they were dominant. And I ask myself, why can't we be dominant? Why should we accept all foreigners as our masters? And that is when I find that the first thing I did when I became Prime Minister was to show that I have no great support for the Commonwealth, the British Commonwealth. I did not attend their meeting. And of course, they expect the ambassador of US, for example, the moment I became Prime Minister, he was, without asking me, arranging for me to visit the President of the United States. I had to tell the Foreign Office that I have no intention of going to America because I prefer to go to our neighboring countries and the Pacific Islanders first before I go to America. So I want to show that we are equal, not inferior to others. And I want Malays to feel that you can do what other people can do. We introduced the slogan Malaysia Boleh, which means Malaysia can. We can do what other people can do. So if they climb Mount Everest, we can climb Mount Everest. If they go to the North Pole, we can do that. If they sail around the world, we can do that also. To convince them that they are not inferior. They can do, provided they have a confidence in themselves.
Dr. Mahathir, that I think that could be the most important, from my point of view, achievement of your life, to overcome that feeling of inferiority complex against others. Because unfortunately, in 2023, in this part of the world, we still have some leaders who would love to meet the ambassador, let alone the president of the United States. And they do not represent the nations, the proud nations of this region very well. So that was very interesting to me. But then at the personal level, how do you manage to be Dr. Mahathir, the modest Malay doctor, and at the same time represent your nation in such a proud way and tell America no, being able to do that? How did you manage that balance, that delicate balance?
Well, my values were implanted in me by my parents, by my environment, but I also read a lot. And I read about, during the British time, we read about the Europeans, the exploits of the European, how the British conquered this country and that country, how they were confident and they could do things that, other people do. And I get influenced by that kind of thinking, that they have heroes, for example, who can always succeed. So I asked myself, why can't we be like that? So that influenced me and balanced the values that my parents and my environment teaches me. So there is a balance between acceptance of Western thinking, Western values, and Eastern values. So I choose what I think is the best. For example, I must not be arrogant, but on the other hand, I must not feel inferior either.
Yeah, sometimes I actually wonder if Dr. Mahathir has an ego, because
Mm.
I go to your Twitter page, and I sometimes you see your tweets, which you used to write it in points, 1, 2, 3, 4, which I love, by the way. That way of writing concise and clear. That's unique to you, I believe, among the world leaders that I follow. That's unique to yourself. But then I come across a comment from a young teenager who was born maybe 15 years ago, and they talk to you in a way which I would not accept myself, let alone to a world leader. Do you follow social media? Do you read these comments? What do you think about when you see such a comment, for example?
Well, you have no choice. You have to read the alternative source of information, because the orthodox source of information is limited, because they come to you in books and in newspapers. That means they have been censored by the editor. They have been uh, cleaned up by the editor. But now people can express anything through the media. No, there's no one between them and the reader. No editor editing what they say. So you find quite a lot of difference in the views of the print media of old and the new media, where you access the information directly from the informant. You see, and of course, I also can reach the whole world just by talking into my telephone.
Yeah.
So we have two different sets of views, and you have to learn to accept which one. There are some old values which are very good, which you should retain, but there are some new ideas which we should also understand.
Well, definitely. So, talking about your interactions on social media, which sometimes cannot be very pleasant, uh, there is a question which I think some people would ask. I, I would ask that question actually. Dr. Mahathir ran a very successful political life. You were prime minister for about 22 years, maybe more or less, and then you are still a very respected political figure in the world, in the Muslim world, in Malaysia. And then suddenly you decided to come back into active politics and engage yourself with all these different political dramas in Malaysia, which you have a lot. Some people would say, why did he do this? Like, Dr. Mahathir, did he need to do this? What was the process like? How did you decide to come back into active politics?
Well, I wanted to retire. I don't want to be involved didn't want to be involved in politics. But with my performance before, lots of people come to see me because my successors did not do as well. So they came to see me, asking me, please do something. Please do something. I tried advising my successors. It was not effective. They still continued with their wrong practices, and people keep on asking me, please do something. So I had to lend my ideas to the others, and in the end, I had to become directly involved. I had to form a political party to fight against my former political party. You see, so I mean, to tell people that, look, I'm going to rest, please don't disturb me. I think that is very selfish. Yeah, we have to prepare for the afterlife and all that. That you can do, but at the same time, there is a lot of time for you to help people, and people are distressed. They come to see you asking you for help. You can't just say, please, I'm retired. You can't. So I feel it is my duty to lend whatever strength that I may have.
That's a very interesting point, actually. So you think that even after what you did for Malaysia at this age, if they came to you and said, please do this for us, and if you refuse, that would be selfish.
Yes, yes, it is very selfish. You are thinking of the akhirat. You want to prepare yourself for the akhirat, but people are asking you, please help. I mean, they are suffering. You can't say, sorry, I am preparing myself for the next world. I can't. I do that. Yeah, that one we do. We all prepare ourselves. We have to go. One day we have to go. But while we are still alive and able, I cannot say that it is right for me to say, sorry, leave me alone. I want to enjoy my life. That I think that would be very selfish.
Well, that kind of forces me to ask the next question: is there a moment in your life where you think you can actually retire from service?
Well, I thought so at the time when I decided to step down. I've been there for 21 years. So I told myself I must give way to younger people. I must not stay too long. Uh, so I decided to resign, and I announced the resignation in a way that people cannot take it away from me, cannot oppose me. But they still persuaded me to stay on for another year. That I accepted. So in all, I was prime minister for 22 years. That is a long time. And I mean, people who were young during the time when I was appointed are now mature. They are quite capable. How can I stand in their way? So I decided to resign and to rest. Unfortunately, after I resigned, things did not go well. For example, my own party was the cause of the failures. So people came to see me, and well, I responded to their appeals.
See, I understand it, and I think some people would understand that. The problem is nowadays, as you are very well aware, people kind of mistrust leaders, even if they are great leaders like Dr. Mahathir. So when you say it's selfish for me not to come back to serve people, some people will say, no, maybe he's just trying to, come back to power and he loves power. That's why he can't leave it. What I understand from the way you do stuff is you don't care about what people think. Is it a true assessment that you really don't care how people see Dr. Mahathir, how people view Dr. Mahathir?
Well, you cannot have people supporting you all the time. In any community, maybe half will support, the other half will not. I've been called a dictator. I have been accused of cronyism and many things. At the time when I was prime minister, I don't care as long as I do what I think is right. And I always remind myself that one day I would retire. I would lose power. If I do something that is bad, when I lose power, I will be punished. While I have the power, yes, people will respect me. But one day I have to retire. And when I retire and without no longer being the prime minister, people can take action against me. So I was very careful during the time when I was prime minister not to commit wrongs, not to steal money, not to abuse power and all that. And today they still accuse me, but I ask them, you accuse me, you take me to the court and prove that I did wrong.
Right. Well, one of the things that I've observed about you, and you have been open about it actually, it's not a secret, is you kind of were disappointed at how the things went on after you. be it with Abdullah Badawi or Tun Najib Razak, or even with Dr. Anwar Ibrahim later. Do you think it's, when you have someone like Dr. Mahathir, it's very difficult to fill in his shoes, no matter who comes in? When you compare him to the predecessor, who's Dr. Mahathir, he will come short. Do you think that it's because of that, or it's some other reasons why these people are not fulfilling in their jobs?
I accepted even before I retired that my successors will not do exactly what I have been doing. But some of the good things that have given good results, those should be continued. I expect my successors to be different, but not to the point where the country suffers. For example, during my time when I was Prime Minister, during election, I used to win with a 2/3 majority. And when I stepped down, Abdullah Badawi took over. They expected him to do better than me, and they gave him full support, more than the support for me. But during the 4 years to the next election in 2008, he did a lot of things that people lost faith in him. And that was the time when they come to see me. They find that although they had supported this man, but he is not performing well. So they came to see me and asked me to do something. So that is the story of whole thing. It's not that I wanted to come back. I never expected to be a prime minister again. But I thought that those formula which enable Malaysia to grow and become, no longer a third world country, but a middle income country. Those formula which work should be continued. You can have other variation of it, but what has worked successfully should be retained. But I find that they veered away completely from what had yielded good results in the past because, they have other ideas.
Well, it's unfortunate that sometimes when, although you didn't found Malaysia, but I think you were one of the founding stones of the new Malaysia. If it was the forefathers of Malaysia in the 1950s and 60s who kind of founded the country, but you took out Malaysia of anonymity in the 1980s and became what we know right now. I think that's thanks to you before anyone else. And it's very difficult when you see your product or your achievements go out in front of your eyes. And I really understand it because I'm close to people who experienced the same thing. They founded something, great thing, and they continued it for some years. And then at one point, the one who came later couldn't continue the same work, and they had to come back and intervene personally, which is not a very nice image actually, because you want to retire and go and enjoy your life. And talking about enjoying your life, as a leader, I don't think you ever had privacy from a from a young age because you were engaged in politics. I didn't think you have privacy. Like whenever you go, people know you, take pictures of you, take selfies with you. They're interested in you. As Dr. Mahathir, as a person, how does it feel to be public 24 hours?
Yeah, well, I'm a very private person. I did not like to be too much exposed, but I had to accept that if you want to be successful, you must accept certain practices which could not avoid. So now I have become a public figure. I cannot do anything that is in public eyes. For example, if I want to do something bad and I find that people are looking at me, so I have to behave myself. So even after I have retired, I have been very careful that not to do things which people do not like.
Well, I think that was my take as well before when I was in Malaysia, that Dr. Mahathir is an introverted person. He's not like an extrovert who wants to be with people and talk and party. And how was that to be private, introverted, but at the same time in the spotlight? How did you manage it?
Well, whether I like it or not, I knew that if I want to be an effective leader, I had to accept being exposed. And when you are exposed like that, it is very important that you behave yourself. You don't do things that people don't like. I mean, like everybody else, I have a lot of distraction, a lot of things that appeals to me, but I know people will not like it. So I have to make that sacrifice because for me, the most important thing is not what I get from my post, not the salary, not the money, not the opportunities, but whether people will still uh, respect me after I am gone.
And how do you like to be remembered, Dr. Mahathir?
Well, when I became Prime Minister, in fact, when I became Minister, I told my staff not to play up my personality, no personality card, no pictures of me, no streets named after me, no buildings named. And today in Malaysia, you will not find my name attached to any monument or anything like that, because I don't allow that. Even when they want to form an association, they want to use my name, they have to ask for my permission, and I don't give permission. So
Right.
because I thought that that is something that people don't like. People don't like when you push yourself too far, too much forward. So I told them I don't want a personality cult. So I told them I don't mind being forgotten.
Oh,
After I'm dead and gone, I don't mind being forgotten. But I think if people can remember what happened, that is their right. But to perpetuate myself by giving names, but of course, there is a limit to that. People want to write books about me. I can't tell them, please don't write. That is their right. You see, so to a certain extent, I cannot stop a kind of personality cult developing around. But I minimize that as much as possible. Mhm.
well, I think, Dr. Mahathir, the problem is sometimes you need role models. And as much as the person himself doesn't want to be exposed to the public or to be having a personality cult around them, the people need that person. Because at the end of the day, a young person, for example, will look at Dr. Mahathir's life and legacy and will be influenced. And you might have, at a certain corner in Africa or in Middle East, a new Dr. Mahathir, just influenced by what you did, what you have written. I personally was very influenced by your views. When I came to Malaysia, I had very different ideas about democracy, for example. It was the Western idea, the Eurocentric idea about democracy and equality. And when I started reading your work, I changed a lot of my views because thanks to you. And even at the time, I didn't realize how profound the changes were until later I went to the UK and did a master's degree in the UK and studied colonialism and stuff like that, where I found Dr. Mahathir was much, much, much before people talking about these issues. And so it's interactions like this where you will be influenced by the leader and you take the footsteps of that leader as a role model. Talking about role models, right now I'm on a visit to Konya in Turkey. Konya is the city of Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi, which I'm sure you have heard about, the writer of Masnavi, medieval philosopher, Arif, and scholar. Who are the role models in Dr. Mahathir's life? Who are some of the scholars, names, Muslim or non, who influenced you and shaped your view about life and the world?
Yeah. I don't know whether people will take offense or not.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to promote myself, but I find that the Prophet is the best model. He changed the Jahiliyyah Arab, the ignorant Arabs, to become a race that can build a whole new civilization extending from China to Spain. He changed the Arabs. They were ignorant. They were doing all kinds of things which are bad, like burying their female children and all that, fighting each other. Uh, they don't consider, their tribalism was very bad. But he changed all that. He united the Arabs, and they were able to build a great civilization. So that is a model for me. But beyond that, I admire people like, and not some aspects of these people, not the whole thing. For example, Peter the Great of Russia. Russia was a very backward Eastern country, but Peter the Great changed that, brought the Russians back to become a West European country, to become a big power and to be very westernized, very progressive, and very, very powerful. And that's Peter the Great. He changed the character of the Russian people from being backward to becoming one of the great people in the world. Then I also admire people like Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela was jailed by the white people for 26 years. When he came out, I was the only Asian leader who was invited by the blacks to meet Nelson. I had a 4-eyed meeting with Nelson Mandela. I was expecting him to be a broken man or a very bitter man because of what he suffered. He wasn't. He was talking about how to rebuild a united South African nation. He didn't have any ideas of revenge against the white. He wants South Africa to be. That is a sentiment which is very unusual. You was jailed for 26 years. 26 years in a lifetime is a very long time. And yet he was not bitter. So I admired Nelson Mandela. Well, there are others, of course, that can serve as models. But I just want to say these three. The Prophet himself, not as a religious person, but the way he changed the character of the Arabs.
Well, I think I have so many questions, Dr. Matthews, so many questions, but we agreed with your team for 45 minutes, and I want to abide by that. I learned a lot in this very short period of time, and I think the best ending was from yourself, where you said the Prophet is the best role model. And it indeed is a verse in Quran which says, وَلَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. Indeed, Prophet is the role model for all of you. Dr. Mahathir, I can't express enough how honored and pleasured I am to be talking to you again, and I look forward to the next session with you, inshallah.
You're welcome.